Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air. President Biden just moments ago in that high-stakes news conference, unscripted, live, taking questions with the world watching. President Biden, the NATO summit in Washington, and one more critical test to save his campaign. His first solo news conference in 8 months. And the new ABC News Washington Post poll tonight, what it shows in this race between President Biden and Donald Trump. It is a tied race, even with the debate. And the poll asking about a hypothetical matchup between Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And what would happen if she was at the top of the ticket, what the poll reveals. Also tonight, the extreme heat. 65 million Americans under heat alerts right now, the staggering heat moving into the east again. And in Texas tonight, more than 1 million customers without power, now days after the hurricane came barreling in. They are in sweltering temperatures. Lee Goldberg standing by with the forecast and the heat now moving into the east. Tonight, the urgent manhunt for a person of interest wanted in the killing of a young sheriff's deputy killed in an ambush. The news tonight coming out of the Alec Baldwin trial, the defense taking aim at a crime scene technician, asking about the lack of surveillance video. Good news on the economy tonight. Inflation now slowing to 3% in June. Will there be a rate cut coming? Tonight, the intense search for a missing 14-year-old girl from Utah, vanishing while visiting her grandmother. Near New York City tonight, shark sightings forcing parts of a popular beach to close. And the tributes tonight to actress Shelley Duvall, her unforgettable roles and the one performance still giving audiences the chills.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening as we come on the air in the West tonight with the breaking news. President Biden has just concluded a rare solo and unscripted news conference. It lasted 50 minutes or more, taking 10 questions from reporters, many of those reporters with follow-ups of their own. So the question count actually much higher than 10 in the end. Speaking for nearly an hour, of course, as you know, we've been reporting here, this is a critical test amid questions about the president's clarity and stamina after that first debate and whether he should continue his run for re-election. The president was asked whether he's concerned about his legacy if he does stay in this race and then loses to former President Donald Trump. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, because, Mary, we heard what the president said there. He said, "This has never been about my legacy," were his words, but this is how he answered the question if he stays in this race. And being fully aware, it was clear the president is aware that there are Democrats on Capitol Hill, some of whom who have called for him to step aside. Let's listen.
I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish.
That was the theme over and over again, Mary, that he said he still has work to finish here, making the case that even though he said 4 years ago, I want to be pass the torch to another generation, he said what changed is the gravity of the job, the issues that have been presented to him, and made the case over and over again that he believes he still has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it is clear, David, that the president is digging in here, and I can tell you the White House tonight feels that he knocked it out of the park here tonight, but that may not be enough. Even as this press conference was going on, we now know that yet another House Democrat has come out saying that he believes it is best for the president to exit this race. The president dismissing that growing chorus, insisting, yes, he is in this. He is still running. He doesn't seem to want to face the reality that while he wants to turn the page on this, the Democrats on the Hill aren't ready yet to do the same, David.
Mary, you know this new ABC News Washington Post poll shows Donald Trump and President Biden in a virtual tie, even after this debate. 47-46, Trump up by 1, but again in the margin of error. Vice President Kamala Harris was also asked of voters if she was the top of the ticket running against Donald Trump. She actually fared better, beating Trump by 3 or 4 points, again within the margin of error. The president tonight was asked if his vice president is ready to step in if the circumstance changes here. Here's what he said.
You mentioned that Your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her.
So 2 key messages tonight, Mary. The president saying he's staying in this race if the circumstance changes. He also made it very clear tonight that he believes his vice president is ready.
Yeah, and he does think that there are others who could beat Donald Trump. He just simply believes that he is the best positioned to do that. But, David, we have also learned that his campaign is privately surveying voters to see what would happen if Kamala Harris were to face off with Donald Trump. Clearly, they're concerned about this, too, David.
Mary Bruce with us live from Washington on the breaking news. Mary, thank you. One more point on this tonight, because as Mary reported there, more than a dozen Democrats on the Hill are now publicly calling for President Biden to step aside. And today, officials from President Biden's campaign actually went to the Hill to meet with Senate Democrats. The meeting described as tense at times. And of course, the question tonight, was it enough to convince them? What they told our Rachel Scott.
Today, behind closed doors, Senate Democrats listened for more than 2 hours as top Biden campaign officials made their case for why the president could still win in November and should stay in the race.
What's on everybody's mind, is there a clear path to victory here? And can we honestly say that we're on a path to defeating Donald Trump and holding onto the Senate and holding onto the House of Representatives?
One senator describing the meeting as tense at times. We're told a number of lawmakers complained to the Biden team that they were being put in difficult, impossible, and untenable positions, having to defend the president's disastrous debate performance to their constituents back home. One senator telling ABC News, "I needed to see hard data that showed a path to success in November, and we did not get that."
Senator Whitehouse,
2 hours later, the meeting breaking up, the president's aides leaving, senators filtering out.
Some of my concerns are allayed. Some others have been deepened.
I spoke with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island as he was heading into the meeting.
Do you believe that President Biden is the best person to defeat Donald Trump in November?
I am going to hold off until we've had this conversation where they will discuss that exact point.
This was Senator Whitehouse after the meeting broke up.
how would you describe the meeting?
Cordial and constructive.
Constructive, okay, but not necessarily enough so far.
I'm not going to characterize it that way.
Peter Welch of Vermont is the only senator to openly call for the president to drop out. Writing in the Washington Post, "We have asked President Biden to do so much for so many for so long. It has required unmatched selflessness and courage. We need him to put us first, as he has done before." I asked him if today's meeting changed his mind.
I have not changed my mind, but I really appreciate the White House folks coming over.
West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin hinting the situation will come to a head this weekend.
I think everyone will be talking over Friday, Saturday, and by Sunday you should have some idea of what's going on.
That was really interesting. Senator Manchin telling you earlier today, and of course this was before the president's news conference moments ago, but telling you Sunday we should know more. I'm curious, Rachel, because a lot of people at home are going to hear Sunday. Is that what people within these political circles are talking about, folks in Washington, or is it merely a signal that this is all coming to a head at some point soon here? And we should also know, bigger picture, the Republican National Convention starts on Monday as well.
Yes, that's exactly right, David. And there's a sense here on Capitol Hill that the president is running out of time to turn his campaign around, that there could be a breaking point within the Democratic Party. Tonight, the president's press conference easing concerns, but not yet erasing them. We know that the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has been meeting with members. He plans to meet with Democratic leadership in the coming days to discuss the path forward. David.
We'll check back in with you tomorrow night. Rachel Scott live in Washington again. Thank you, Rachel. In the meantime, we move on down to the other major news this Thursday night, the storms and the dangerous heat wave moving east. 65 million Americans on alert right now from the heat. Lee Goldberg with the forecast, the heat now moving into the east next. And tonight, take a look at this. In Texas, more than 1 million customers still without power in this searing and dangerous heat. Days after the hurricane now, hospitals struggling to keep up. Lee standing by with the forecast, and ABC's Faith Abube from Houston.
Tonight, nearly 4 full days since Hurricane Beryl made landfall, frustration and misery setting in across southeast Texas.
You would have thought that by now they would have had a better plan than what is happening now.
Susie Cisneros and her husband Tony have already lost all the food in their refrigerator. Their only reprieve is when they go to the hospital for Susie's treatments for breast cancer.
I kind of just hang out there at the hospital just to cool off a little bit.
Beryl knocked out power to nearly 3 million customers. Houston's main utility company, CenterPoint, admitting they should have done more to improve their infrastructure ahead of the storm. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick speaking for Governor Greg Abbott, who's currently on an economic trade mission in Asia, calling for an investigation into CenterPoint.
If CenterPoint meets their goals by Sunday, they will have reduced it from about 2.2 million people without power down to still about 500,000 for next week. Folks, that is not acceptable.
And David, the power outages here in Texas are straining hospital resources. So many patients unable to be discharged because their homes are just too hot. And now this arena behind me being used as a transitional facility until those patients can go home. David.
Extraordinarily difficult several days there in Texas. Faith Abube, Faith, thank you.